Hello and welcome everybody to our Flight Sim fan video. Today we're back in DCS world and we're talking about range and endurance. Now I see a lot of questions sometimes, people saying that their aircraft doesn't have, they can't go that far, they run out of fuel too quickly, or they're mid-fight and they just run out of fuel. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit fuel endurance, how to get the max range out of your aircraft, and what those are, what's range, what is endurance. So we talked about that today. I'll be referencing the F-18, the F-14, the F-16 fuel flow gauges as well, so just 3 different aircrafts, and it'll apply to pretty much everything, but just for today. We're going to go through some basic climb profiles that I use for most aircraft, and it works pretty well as a general rule. If you fly a lot of airplanes in DCS like me, I don't have time to memorize every number per plane, so I just have a general consensus, and they're for the most part all in the same ballpark. What else will we talk about today? We'll talk about how to get them. Yeah, so basically how to get the max fuel used in your airplane. All right, so let's go to the presentation now. Alright guys, so first we're going to talk about why you're going to want to know this. Why is it beneficial to you to learn this in DCS? Most people come to DCS just want to fly around, that's alright. But if you want to dive more into DCS and learn how aircraft, more about aircraft, how they work, how they should be used, it's for you today. So what it allows you to do, knowing range and endurance, it allows you to bring more weapons, because of if you're just loading your tanks up, you're loading your stores up with fuel tanks, you got less places to put weapons, right? If you ever fly with me, you'll notice I put a center tank on, and then everything else is groovy. The 14, I just bring the 2 because asymmetric, but 16 centerline tank, you can go across the whole map, no problem, and drop a lot of your ordnance, come right back. Especially in online servers, no one really lasts up there that long anyways, so you got an hour of play time. Plus there's tankers as well. Alright, so you last longer in the air to be able to make it home, and you last longer to provide your cap or your CAS, whatever you're doing, you just last longer to be up there. More fun, DCS experience. I don't know about you, but I hate going RTV with missiles on board, so if I can get all those missiles off and then turn back with a good amount of fuel back to make it home to the boat, that's where it's golden. And then it enhances your pilot knowledge and your skill. So just getting to know different concepts of aviation always enhances what you're doing in the aircraft. All right, so we'll move on. So I don't know if you've seen this before. We got our kind of power and drag curve here. So the top one, we're going to be talking about range and endurance today. So the top one is talking about range. You can see it says drag or thrust required in pounds, velocity in knots. So these are taken off the flight training manual. This is for light aircraft, but just as a basics, as a concept, it still applies. So for range, we're trying to achieve the best lift to drag ratio, and that'll give us the greatest range of the aircraft. You can see the total drags at its lowest here, parasite induced where they meet. So best lift to drag will be right in there. If we move down here to maximum endurance, and we'll talk about which each one is the difference between them is, you'll see that it's minimum power required. So it's where the power next slide. It's where you need the least amount of power. All right, so that's how that looks on a graph. All right, endurance. So it is the maximum length of time that the aircraft can sustain flight airborne. All right, so minimum power used. That's why if you go back to the drag curve here, or the chart here, minimum power used. Power available, we want the minimum power used here. Okay, so endurance, minimum power used, you're just waiting. Things to use max endurance for: if you're holding, you can use that. If you are, let's say, doing cap over an area, you don't need to make it anywhere, just slow down to your max endurance, get slower, minimum power used, and that'll allow you just to orbit the cap area for a while. Now, in DCS, I wouldn't recommend slowing down to max endurance, just because if you do get engaged by something you haven't seen yet, you're going to be pretty slow to go evasive. So I kind of hold between the 0.7, 0.8 mark in general for all DCS aircraft, jet-wise, F-18, 14, that kind of stuff. 0.7, 0.8 on the Mach is okay. 0.8 is nicer, but yeah. Some factors that affect endurance: obviously your fuel, because if you didn't have that, then you just stay up forever if fuel is limited. Angle of attack: the more angle of attack you're generating, or you have, the more lift you're generating. The more lift you're generating, the more induced drag you're generating. So it depends how much different aircraft differ, but angle of attack affects that. Airspeed, yep, pretty self-explanatory. So the slower you're going, the more lift you need to create for your aircraft. And as we just said, more lift, more induced drag. So slower's not that great. The faster you go, the more parasite drag you get. So you're going to try to find that sweet spot. And that's why if we look back here, you can see total drag as you're slow. This is all induced drag. So you can see the induced drag. When velocity is slow, it's high. As you increase speed, you don't need as much lift to keep you in the air, so the induced drag goes away. However, parasite drag, parasite drag is the aircraft just going through the air. You'll notice as you get faster, parasite drag increases. So you got to find that sweet spot right in the middle. So that's how airspeed affects that. Aircraft weight, that's pretty self-explanatory. The heavier it is, more thrust needed, more lift needed to keep it there in the air. CG, center of gravity. So I should have had a teeter. You think of a teeter-totter. So if you have a teeter-totter, or think of an aircraft, if you have it nose heavy, it's going to want to pitch down. Just theoretical, by the way. It's going to be nose heavy, so you're going to have to pull up, which puts you closer to the critical angle of attack. Gives you more angle of attack. With an aircraft that has a tail heavy CG or an aft CFG, it's going to be tail heavy, so you're going to push it down, which gets you less angle of attack, which affects the drag. Altitude, higher you go in the jets, the better the fuel burn. Thin air up there. Okay, so we got range is next. So it's achieve the furthest distance for the fuel available. Factors that affect this is same as endurance, except wind is involved. So obviously if you have a headwind, that's going to slow you down, so it's going to give you less ground speed over the ground, so you're not going to get as far. Whereas if you have a 50 knot tailwind or something like that, you can you can leave the power it is, or even bring it back, and you'll have the same speed or greater speed if you have a tailwind. So that's why tailwinds are favorable. Okay. So we'll talk about some climb profiles here. So in general, this is talking about if you fly a lot of airplanes. In general, 350 knots in the climb until you transition to 0.75 is usually the best. Mil power works just after mil power, like 95, 98%, depending if you have a wingman or something like that, will be just fine. And it'll be a slow climb, but it's going to be more efficient. The reason for this is a lot of people, they either throw in full burner or they jack up mil power and they just get the nose up straight up to like 30 degrees or something like that. By the time they reach that altitude, they got there pretty quickly, but they're so slow at that point that they have to engage burner or do something to get their speed back up, or lose that altitude, trade the altitude again for speed again. If you hold a constant 350 knots, transition to 0.75 in the climb, this is Mach by the way, I wrote that wrong. The zero should be on the other side. But if you hold that constant airspeed, it'll allow you to, once you get to, let's say, 25,000 feet, 30,000 feet, it'll allow you just to either keep the power at mil to increase speed a little bit more, or even bring it back to cruise power. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit there. You're already at your nice cruising speed of 0.75. So the way this works is you take off, you tell your wingman or whoever you're flying with, I'm pitching for 350, 95% power. So you're going to set the throttles to 95% RPM or whatever RPM you want to use for your aircraft. And you're going to hold 350 with the climb with your pitch. So if you're 340 knots and you're 10 degrees nose up, pitch the stick down. Don't add power. Pitch the stick down. Let the speed regain, and then and then bring the pitch back up and hold 350. If you're 400 knots. Okay, if you're 400 knots, you're going too fast. You can afford to lose 50 knots there if you're 400. So you just pitch the nose up, and you can climb a bit faster and get that 350. You can use 400 knots at 0.8, 300 0.7. I like 350 0.75. It's a general rule for all aircraft. It works nicely. The 14, I will say, does like 400 at 0.8 a bit better though. Okay. Moving on, easiest way in DCS to know how far you can make it, the way I like to do it in DCS, is you have your fuel flow gauge, right? So Tomcat, fuel flow on the right-hand side, FF, fuel flow, pounds per hour. F18, fuel flow, pounds per hour. And then pounds per hour, F16 there. So you can see here, let's use the 16 for example, roughly doing 8,000 pounds an hour, we'll round up. So 8,000 pounds an hour. Let's use the Hornet because I got fuel in here as well. So we have 10,600 pounds of fuel pretty much full there. Ooh, next picture. And we're doing 4,400 an hour. So that's 2,200 plus, because you got two engines, right? So you got to add those together. Throw 4,400 an hour. You got 10.6 to work with. So 4 plus 4, that's 8. So that's 8,800 is 2 hours of fuel. So this is 2 hours and a bit more of fuel. This is about 2 hours and maybe 3 hours of fuel here. 2 hours and 50, 3 hours of fuel here that you have. Just rough numbers. Be conservative for yourself. So I'll show you how to use this a bit better. Here we are at, see if I can zoom in. It looks like 35,000 feet. We're pretty high up there. We're doing, this is the gauge here, right here. This isn't the same picture, but these bars in that picture are at the 2,000, just below the 2,000 mark each side, which means we're doing 4 total. Okay, we have 3,500 pounds of fuel, and we're doing 4,000 an hour. We roughly have 45 minutes of fuel. It could be a bit conservative just so you can make your destination. I always knock off 5 minutes or something like that just to make sure, to give yourself a little wiggle room. So we'll just call it 50 minutes of fuel. Okay, you can see that we're 35,000 feet, holding Mach 0.8. I'm holding Mach 0.8 with 2,000 per side, just actually below 2,000 per side. Okay, so this is a picture of where we started this. So I actually took this late. I was actually here, so I was just over Nellis, and we were at 30. This is this picture. So we're at 35,000 feet at Mach 0.8, 2,000 per side, 4,000 per hour total. Okay, this is how far I made it, burning roughly 1,000 pounds. So we started there. I made it here on 1,000 pounds of fuel. Okay, so we're still, so you see this picture. I wish I could enlarge it, I can't, but we're at 2,300 pounds or something like that. Still holding just below the 2,000 per side mark, 0.8 Mach, and we're just cruising. I made it. I mean, I made it almost this entire map if I just kept going. So the scenario is you just lost all your or you shot all your weapons off. You're turning home, get up to nice altitude, do your nice climb profile up to 35,000 feet, something like that, 40,000 feet. Set your power back. And I like about 2,000 per side, and the Tomcat works pretty nicely. And you can see I made it, I don't know, what, 130? I gotta go measure it, but that's miles. I mean, it's really far. I made that. 1,000 pounds of fuel. Okay, guys, so I hope that really helps you understand range and endurance. I should have had like an ending picture. I'll leave it on this, but I hope that makes you understand the range and endurance of these aircraft a bit more, so the knowledge behind it. If you have any questions, please leave in the comments below. If you want our Discord, it'll be in the bottom as well. And if you're looking to do some real training, I have some real videos on the way. We have the current ones up, control mapping. All right. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll see you guys next time.